Hello and welcome to episode 31 of the Australian Roundtable Podcast on Sunday the 10th of May 2015. I'm your host John LeBon and I'm joined via Google Hangout today by Ethan Nash of TOTT News. Thanks for being there.
Good to be here, Johnno.
And we're also fortunate enough to again have with us via Hangout our resident wise old elder, Silver Fox himself, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us. And he's got himself on mute, so I'm sure he means to say hello. We'll hear from him in just a moment. And later on in the show, we're going to be joined by a very special guest, Lucas, to talk to us about Bitcoin. So we'll have a large segment about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and online internet security, all the rest of it. He's an expert at it, and he'll be joining us for the last 30 or 40 minutes of the show. So you can look forward to that. But for any listeners, I'll just read out this little blurb. The ARP is a Brisbane-based independent news analysis discussion roundtable, which broadcasts live every Sunday from 3 p.m. AEST or thereabouts. Live listeners can take part in a live chat forum at the YouTube channel during broadcasts. All episodes are archived at that channel and are also available in MP3 format for you to download for free from our website, ausroundtable.com. Views presented by individual panelists and guests are not necessarily representative of the entire panel, and all important information cited during the broadcast will be linked to at our website, ausroundtable.com, so you can verify and analyse it for yourself, which we always recommend you do. Episodes generally run to 2 hours, and although it is a roundtable discussion, we do keep to a rough structure for each episode, generally breaking it up into a domestic and international segment. And I'll get to today's rundown for right now. We'll start off discussing the latest Mother's Day psyop, and then in domestic we've got 6 topics. Number 1, New South Wales Police to be further militarised. 2, more vaccination propaganda. 3, 2015 budget propaganda. 4, China buying up Aussie property. 5, climate change honesty, bit of a change. And 6, more Jewish alleged child sex abuse and cover-ups. That'll be a long piece, and I've put that one together. Then in international, we've got the Jimmy Saville report to be shelved, and the Baltimore psyop and how it mirrors the French Revolution. Lindsay's put together a feature piece for us on that, and I'm looking forward to it. And then we're joined by Lucas, as I said, and we'll discuss all things Bitcoin. So a huge show to get through today, lads. But before we get started, we'd like to say hello. I can see you've got yourself off mute there. Lindsay, how have you been, my good man?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for that introduction. I'm sorry I was still on mute. Yeah, no, good. I'm good, thanks.
No, that's all right, mate. And Ethan, you couldn't join us in the studio today, but that's all right. How are things down there halfway between Brisbane and the Gold Coast?
Yeah, it's been another productive week for me personally, and I look forward to a good episode, Johnno.
It will be a terrific episode. It might go a little bit longer than usual to fit in everything, but I'm sure it'll be well worth the time that we do take. And the first thing that we like to do on each episode is have a laugh at the latest psyop. And sure enough, you know what today is today, boys? It's Mother's Day, which means we've got ourselves a Mother's Day psyop. Now, this one is from the Herald Sun down in Melbourne, another Rupert Murdoch paper, and the title is Mother's Day Plot, Lives Saved When Teenagers' Alleged Attack Foiled, police say. And they've got 4 authors for this one. This is from May 10. This is from today. And I'll just quote a short piece from the article. Quote, a teen accused of plotting a deadly Mother's Day terror attack allegedly hid his homemade bombs from his parents. Australian Federal Police and forensic squads are still combing the teen's house today after terrifying details emerged of the alleged plot. 3 pipe bombs, powerful enough to cause a catastrophe, were found during a raid at a house in Melbourne's north on Friday. The Sunday Herald Sun has been told the troubled teen had planned to set off the bombs in Melbourne today. Senior police yesterday said their dramatic raids, spoiling a potential terror attack, had saved the lives of Victorians. Police said that while they didn't have specific intelligence identifying any targets, nor when an attack might occur, an imminent threat had been averted. Authorities have blocked off the street outside the double-storey home and set up tents and a catering van, indicating that officers are preparing to remain at the house for some time. AFP Deputy Commissioner Mike Phelan said he could absolutely guarantee police action had saved lives, end quote. And the article just goes on and on and on like that. And I'm sure for a lot of Victorians reading their newspapers this morning, this came as quite a shock. But to those of us who've been following this, this is just a straight up and down black and white psyop. Lindsay, what say you?
Yes, I'm sort of amusing myself here, laughing about it, but it's true, isn't it? Oh, we discussed this last week, I think it was, and it's the same thing over and over and over. And there's so many presumptions in it. Like you just said, oh yeah, I can assure you they were going to do something. We don't know where or when or whatever, but yeah, you can believe us, they were going to do it. And it's the same thing all the time.
I read that article verbatim, okay? I put my own intonations in there, obviously for somewhat comical effect, but essentially I read that article as they intend it to be read, in a dramatic, scary tone, because they're trying to scare us, Ethan.
Yeah, Johnno, and Lindsay hit the nail right on the head. Even though the mainstream media is completely controlled, we still do have a code of ethics that people try to pretend to adhere to, and one of those is you actually have to, give the fundamental details of everything, but people still don't care. They can start the article off with big scary words, and that I saw on the news they said that thousands of lives had been saved by this raid, and but then they can say in the article, we didn't know where he was going to do an attack, or even if he had the intent to do an attack, but we can guarantee that there was going to be an attack happening. And people just buy this up. And for most of our listeners, this is as funny to us as it is to them. But the rest of the people, we need to keep reiterating this. People are believing this and are spending their holidays, it seems, every time a terror raid happens in fear, Jono.
Well, in the live chat, we've got just over 20 people watching live already, and Robot Broken says another Mother's Day has been saved, and Lord Rollo says, who needs mothers to keep us on the straight and skinny when we have the Victoria Police, smiley face? And look, we live in a nanny state. How long until we give the government its own day of praise? Like, praise the government day, praise the police day. It sounds ridiculous, but so does this article, and people lap it up. We do have to get into the domestic topic proper, though, and the first topic today kind of follows on from this. And it is to do with the New South Wales Police being further militarised, Ethan.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. And it does follow on. This is the it seems like this is the trend that happens after these attacks, as we saw with the Anzac Day raids. There were more police presence at the Anzac Dawn services. There were more police throughout the cities after Manhar and Monash. The bins here in Brisbane, to make an example, were closed. There was AFP doing. They were going through the city, doing routes of the city and whatnot. But this is another further article from the Sydney Morning Herald from May 8th, and it's and I'll read this out right now. Quote: police in New South Wales are ill-equipped to deal with a terrorist attack and require urgent upgrades to simple items such as ballistic and stab-resistant vests for every officer, the police union says. Among several security upgrades being demanded by the Police Association New South Wales, permission for on-call police to be able to take their guns home with them, an upgrade to radio networks, and an end to signal unit policing. President Scott Webber outlined gaping holes in the force's ability to thwart terrorist attacks after Victoria Police issued new protocols on Thursday, making it compulsory for officers to wear bulletproof vests and on patrol, and not to walk alone. The Victorian announcement followed the arrest of several Melbourne men who allegedly plotted to mow down and behead a policeman on Anzac Day, then use the officer's gun to go on a shooting rampage. Now, the article continues on about that. I'm getting a bit nauseous reading these mainstream media articles every week, but the basic premise here is, again, if you look into it, you can find that there's only one or two arrests in these occasions. The charges that they have are not related to terrorism; they're related to weapon-specific things. That even is if these people actually exist and these raids actually do happen. And here we go once again. Now, further calls for police to take their guns home with them, upgrades to radio networks, to every police officer to be walking around in units, and to have police vests. And it's not the police, in my opinion, that are the bad guys in this situation, because they might genuinely believe that there are terrorist attacks, but those that are controlling the media are using these attacks as a way. When you look at it from the basis level, they are putting more and more officers in more militarized fashions, Jono, to just incrementally build the police state around us, and it's a concerning thing.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the only way to keep us and the police safe would be to station a police officer at the end of every street and just get the citizens to report in of a morning and an afternoon with their papers. I mean, that's pretty clearly the only logical way to keep the country safe from ISIS. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, that's what they'd like you to believe. That's the thing that upsets me about it. But we know that they never arrive in time anyway. Even domestic and stuff where they've been told about it, they always get there late. So the last thing we need are police. I think well, you know my favourite thing. We all need to have our own protection ourselves, which we're guaranteed under Magna Carta. So, you know, there's this whole thing. I was talking before about presumptions. There's always this presumption. I know when they brought the gun laws in New South Wales, the basic thing they had was that you're no longer allowed to have a gun for self-defence. And yet, well, my thing is, well, why are the coppers taking them home? Obviously, they're taking them home for self-defence. So there's one law for them and one for us. Aren't we all supposed to be equal under the law? There's just so many presumptions going on here that are false, and yet they keep going on with this rubbish. So I won't get too. It upsets me. You can probably tell by my voice, but I won't keep going on. I'll hand that back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, Lindsay, you're right, and that's it again. They're trying to, and again, I don't believe that it is the individual police's responsibility or fault on their level, you know, because they are just as, you know, they're citizens just like us. They've just been brainwashed to believe something different. In my opinion, you hit the nail right on the head, Lindsay. There's separate laws for them, separate laws for us. When we are all equal, we are all, you know, we are their bosses, and they continue to forget this. But you've watched this, Lindsay, as we spoke about numerous times on the show. You've watched how the police have incrementally became more militarized, and now these days they don't even have to have a proper excuse or show proper evidence to put more officers on the street, to have them more heavily armed, to have them more heavily guarded, and to ultimately manipulate public opinion to believe that terrorists are everywhere and more power to the state is the way to go, Johnno.
Yeah, and obviously I was being facetious when I talked about demanding everyone have their papers, but if you can't see that we're quickly moving into, you know, a Gestapo Germany type situation, then I really can't help you, because that's clearly what's happening. And if you look at the psyops that they've been performing in Canada and in Australia, always, every time they supposedly take down a supposed terrorist, like Newman Hayter down there in Melbourne last year, every time the terrorist target is the police, right? And every time they fail for some reason. And what's the plan there? It's to make us believe that the police are at risk, so we're more likely to accept the police being militarized, to the point where we're like, oh yeah, let them take their guns home, they need it. They're the ones who are under threat. Whereas, exactly like Lindsay said, we're not supposed to own guns because we can rely on those very same police. It's a messed up system, and anyone with their eyes open can see that. We try and, you know, tailor this show to those awake people, but to anyone who's listening to this for the first time and is wondering what we're talking about, you have to ask yourself, if this terrorism threat was real, how come it's your newspapers who are doing all the terrorizing? Okay, if it was the terrorists who wanted you to be scared, why would the newspapers then be the ones running front page articles about how the police just saved you from yet another alleged terror plot? It's utterly ridiculous when you think about it for yourself. And in the live chat, a number of people have been talking about it. We've got more than 30 people with us at the moment. I appreciate all of you guys being there. Trevor Weir says, look at what a wonderful job we're doing, give us more money. That's exactly what this is about. And if you look at the amount of money that's spent on the police force, you can see that they have a vested interest in keeping the fear up. You look at the newspapers and how they fit into the entire media government apparatus, they've got a vested interest in keeping you scared. Basically, all of these organizations are in it for themselves, and until you understand that and until you realize that, you'll keep falling for their stupid, foolish plots. But we do have to move on to the second topic for today, for domestic, and that is to do with vaccinations. Now, last week, of course, we spent some time up there on the sunny coast with Lisa, and we did a big article, a big feature piece on vaccinations, and we're planning to keep on talking about vaccinations. It's such an important issue right now here in Australia because, of course, just recently it was announced that people who don't get their children vaccinated here in Australia risk losing up to $15,000 in tax rebates. And, of course, the way that our tax system and our transfer payment system works, that affects just about everybody here in this country. Basically, this is one small step away from forced vaccinations, and it's going to come into effect, that policy, supposedly on the 1st of next year. So we haven't got much time to wake people up to what's going on here, so we'll continue to talk about vaccinations. And Lindsay, I understand that you've been following the propaganda in the Courier Mail.
Yes, thanks for that. Yeah, I have been. But this is over probably a week and a half now. I just went through and collected a number of articles about it, so I'll get straight into it. They all come from the Courier Mail. The first was on the 26th of April, and it was called "Vile Trolls Baby Barb," and I'm not quite sure what that meant exactly, but I think it was that the bereaved parents, I'll quote this, the bereaved parents of Riley Hughes, who died of whooping cough last month, have spoken of their dismay after becoming the target of an anti-vax hate campaign after the Abbott government announced its no jab, no pay plan. Anti-vax activist Nicole Johnson from the Australian Vaccination Skeptics Network accused the family of inciting hatred towards anti-vaxxers in a private direct message. I'm sorry for the loss about the level of your baby, but I'm concerned about the level of hatred being incited by your campaign, she wrote.
Looks like Lindsay is on mute. Ethan, can you hear me? We'll take up, I know that you've got an article for us about vaccination. We'll go straight to that, and then we'll come back to Lindsay once we've gotten through your piece.
Yeah, thanks, Johnno, and apologies to some of our live audience that may have heard that just then. I had an article to follow on, and we spoke last week, as Johnno mentioned. We went and we visited Lisa, who's been a campaigner here in Brisbane for a number of years now, and we spoke. One of the sub-segments that we spoke about was how you shouldn't have trust in a government and medical establishment that have let you down in the past, that have lied to you in the past, and that don't even in their fundamental stages know what's right if that tries to encompass it. And this is a perfect example. This came out this week. It was on May 7th, 2015. It was by perthnow.com.au, and I'll just read. It says, flu vax given to children under 5 despite ban, prompting warning by Australia's chief medical officer. Now, for those who don't know, flu vax was a vaccine that got banned because it was causing convulsions in children and whatnot, and it was banned across the country for children under 5 because it was causing these things. But this week, it has come out again that children are still being or have been beginning to be vaccinated with these again. And I'll just quote from the article here: 9 Australian children have been given a flu vaccine banned in children under 5 because it can cause fever and febrile convulsions. The Federal Department of Health has confirmed that flu vax has been administered to children in less than a month. There have been 3 cases in New South Wales, 3 in Queensland, 1 in South Australia, and 2 in Western Australia, so all over the country. It has prompted an urgent warning from the country's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Bagley, to all health professionals. They have also been advised if it is given to a child under 5, it constitutes, quote, off-label use, which exposes the health providers to legal risk. A spokeswoman for the department said to reduce the risk of young children being given the flu vax by mistake, it delayed the start of the national vaccine program until at least one of the vaccines suitable for this age group was available, and that's the context. The vaccine program that they introduced not too long ago was delayed because they had to find a replacement for flu vax because it wasn't working. And the article goes on to quote more medical establishment and whatnot, but I wanted to bring this up because this is a perfect example of reinforcing what we spoke about last week, and that is that why would you trust a government that has lied to you and let you down? Here, in my personal opinion, here we are seeing that doctors are giving children flu vax over the country. 9 children have been given flu vax again, even though it's completely banned. And in my estimation, that represents not only the ignorance that doctors have with not knowing what vaccines or what's in the vaccines, it also poses a very dangerous threat to show you that if the powers that be that control these pharmaceutical companies that have been caught so many times and been trialed so many times for these dangers, it shows what they could do with the power of manipulating or keeping these doctors ignorant and not teaching them through education what the ingredients hold, if you can get what I was saying. I'll throw that one over to you there, Johnno. Just this basic notion that the medical industry is the be-all and end-all of, and just blindly believe what they say, but yet we have another example here of where the medical establishment is getting it wrong, and that's a major concern.
Yeah, I mean, looking more broadly, the way that I see it is the medical industry is an industry, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if you believe that every dollar that's spent or received in that industry is for the benefit of the patients, then sadly you just haven't thought this one through. and the size of it now. I mean, you look at the Australian federal budget, I think health takes up like a quarter of total federal government spending. I might be misquoting that figure, so don't quote me, but it's a huge proportion of the federal budget. It's a huge proportion of the state budgets, and it's a massive industry, and plenty of people are taking their cut. And you better believe that the multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies exist to return a shareholder to their profits. They exist to make money for the people who run the businesses. They don't exist to help patients. If helping patients will make them some money, they'll do that. If harming patients will make them money, they'll do that. That's just the nature of business. That's the nature of the world that we live in. Now, most people don't want to hear that. They don't want to believe that the people who they put so much trust in could ever be using them, for their own purposes. They refuse to believe that. That's why they go along with the nonsense. But I think most of our listeners are fully aware of the fact that you cannot trust others for your own health. You've got to trust yourself for your health, Ethan.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jono, and this is a major concern for me, just because if we're looking at it on a very ground level, FluVax is banned, yet doctors have just been injecting it into 9 children around the country, even though it's banned. So what does that tell you about what the doctors know, and second, why were the flu vaccines available for the doctors to get? And when we can look at the agenda behind that and understand where that's going, and we'll get to that in future episodes when we do feature pieces on it. But this is not what is being told in the mainstream media, and all that's been told in the mainstream media is propaganda about how people that have concerns like this are the crazy ones. And Lindsay, I know you're back off mute now, and you had some technical difficulties before, but could you elaborate on where you were going with those articles? Continue where you picked off, because it's important to show this propaganda to the people, to just realize how they are shadowing our perceptions from seeing the truth behind what's really going on here, Lindsay.
Okay. Can you tell me whether I'm lagging or not, so I don't keep going unnecessarily? Is that all right so far?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure where I was up to before it dropped out, but I'll just go on. There was an article called "Anti-Vaxxers Con Kids on Cancer Jab." I don't know whether I got through with that one, but I'll start. It'll only take me a few seconds. Quote, "The misguided anti-vaccination movement is suspected of being behind teenagers' low uptake of the human papillomavirus vaccine for cervical cancer." On the 1st of May, there was another one, and the headline was "Cervical Cancer Risk Plummets." And the quote from that was that the cervical cancer vaccine has halved the rate of cancerous abnormalities in girls aged under 20 to the lowest levels in recent years. However, there has been an increase in the rate of cervical cancer abnormalities detected among women aged 25 to 39. It's almost exactly what you were talking about. Reasons for this include a change in the classification of abnormalities in 2006. End of quote. This article is certainly sending out mixed messages. And that, to me, that almost coincides with the fluoridation, where they keep changing what is a dental caries or whatever. And they keep changing the goalposts, so that it's very hard to compare what was happening before to what's happening now. And that sounds almost exactly what's happened there. Their classification of an abnormality has changed. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. So anyway, the cervical cancer only plummets in girls under 20, but increases in older groups as a result of a change in classification. So why have the headlines, unless you are using this article as just one more bullet in a fuselage over the last month to demonize anti-vaccination groups in the minds of the great unwashed, who seem only to read the headlines, informing their opinions? So I'll leave it at that. I think I might be lagging there again, so I'll just pull out for a minute and let you fellas.
No, you're right, mate. So basically, I looked over your agenda this morning, and you'd noted that in just the last week in the Courier Mail, which is our Murdoch newspaper here in Brisbane, there were 4 separate articles across the week dealing with vaccinations. And again, in every single case, it was either neutral or anti-vaxxers, pro-vaccination, if you like. And so the first one was on April 26, Vile Trolls Baby Barb, was about an anti-vaxxer. The second one on April 28 was the vax myth exposed as a lie. The next article was anti-vaxxers con kids on cancer jab. And then on the 1st of May, the cervical cancer risk plummets. Cervical cancer vaccine has halved the rate of cancerous abnormalities, yada, yada. So in the space of 1 week, just one person, you there, Lindsay, noticed 4 separate pro-vaccination articles in one newspaper here in Brisbane. Now, in any other time, thinking people would say, well, this is just clear and blatant propaganda, and yet the average person in Australia today believes all this nonsense, Ethan.
Yeah, Jono, it's extremely concerning, and as I was going to point out with the flu vaccine article that I spoke about, that's what should be talked about, not demonizing people that question the system, not demonizing people that have concerns that the medical industry, even if you don't believe there's an agenda behind it, which, you know, hopefully people, even if they're on the fence, will once we get to the incremental stages and we go past the dangers to, you know, what could be the agenda behind it, etc., the vested interests. But even if you don't believe there's vested interests behind it, you still should be concerned on a basic level that here's an example this week, just this week, of numerous examples of where the medical industry has got it wrong, has made mistakes, and can't be trusted. And parents should be concerned about this. But as Lindsay has pointed out, all we're being bombarded with, Jono, is pro-vaccine, if you want to use that terminology, pro-vaccine propaganda to demonize those who question the system. And it's an extremely concerning thing, because this is one of the hottest topics in the country right now, and people aren't being exposed to the greater side of the story. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we spent so much time last week with Lisa Wecker talking about vaccinations. We'll talk later in the show for our final thoughts about another guest that we plan to get on. And I can tell you, I went through our emails yesterday. I spent a few hours replying to the email backlog that we've got from the listeners, and so many of them are concerned about this. And many of them are parents who have every right to be concerned. And you can see, I mean, you can imagine how it must be for a parent to be bombarded by this information or this disinformation that we get from the mainstream media just day after day after day, not just saying that vaccines are good, but saying that those who question vaccines are evil or are bad or are malicious or nefarious or whatever. You can see how easy it would be for them to fall into line and want to vaccinate their kids. And then you can also see how once they've vaccinated the first or second kid, how hard it would be for them to admit that they made a mistake with the first one or two and then not vaccinate the third. I mean, it's almost like once they suck you in, they've sucked you in for good, you know, psychologically, if that makes sense. And I can tell from the feedback that we get from listeners that to a lot of them this is an important topic, and so it very well should be, not just for the vaccination aspect, but for what comes next. If we say that the state has control over your kids, whether you like it or not, they get to jab it with mercury and formaldehyde and all these other chemicals, no matter what you say, then it's only one step away from microchips. And only a couple of years ago, if you said that the state would be microchipping people, people would have said that you were crazy. But you can slowly see more and more pro-microchip articles popping up into the news, as we discussed last week. And once you've given up sovereignty over your body and over your children's body and over your neighbours' children's bodies, you hand that over to the state. You better believe the state's going to use that, and you better believe they're going to use it for nefarious purposes. Lindsay, with all of that said, I'll throw back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's not much I can add to that. You've heard me before. I think it's a horrible thing to do to people. This whole propaganda war by Murdoch is an absolute disgrace, and not only just him, but all his journalists who, under the thumb, follow his orders and carry on with this. I mean, they should know better than they do. So I just find that really disgusting, and I'll leave it at that.
Ethan, I'll give you some final thoughts for this segment, but I can guarantee we'll be talking about this again next week and probably every week thereafter, right up until they start forcing this down people's throats.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. Again, there's not much more that we can add except to flip it on to somewhat of a positive side. We do now have this platform, not just this platform, but other platforms. You know, we hopefully can get some future guests on that can speak about their work with vaccines. We obviously spoke about Lisa last week through her personal story and her campaigning against it. Now that we do have the platform and the like-minded community to get this information out, I want to encourage the listeners, while we keep talking about this, you know, spread the word, spread our links around, make your own links, start your own shows, talk about this with your friends, talk about this with your neighbors. From a grassroots level, do what the media should be doing in this country, and that's inciting some discussion and no propaganda behind it, no agenda behind it. Incite discussion with your friends and your neighbors about this, and read some of these articles that we read out, because there's another side of the story. And again, Jono summed it up perfectly. It's not about whether you're pro-choice or you're a pro-vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer. This is about pro-choice, to resist state tyranny, in my estimation, because once, as Johnno said, you hand your child over to the state, you can't even decide what to do with your own child, then that sets a dangerous precedent, Johnno, and we can only go downhill from there. So I encourage everyone to keep the discussion up, and let's do what the mainstream media should be doing in this country.
And it's pretty clear that most of our listeners listening live right now are onto it. Let's see, we've got Sol says, put everything in the water supply. It's science after all. And this goes to what you were saying before last week about scientism, the faith that the average peasant has these days for the scientists. The scientists must be right. They wouldn't try and hurt us. You know, we can trust them. That's the mindset of most people. Azimithal Clark 462 says that Aldous Huxley told everyone what was going to happen through pills and vaccines. They will teach people to love their servitude. And I couldn't agree with him more. And if you still haven't read Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World, then you don't understand that this was planned decades upon decades, if not centuries ago. And it's all coming to pass in our lifetimes. In our lifetimes, we're going to see exactly what they predicted. And this vaccinations thing is just the tip of the iceberg, like we keep on saying. And Silver Slave 333 says, if a scientist is paid by Big Pharma to say it's good for your health, it must be. We, the peasants, aren't wearing white coats, so we mustn't be as smart as them. So just obey your authorities. And that's exactly what it is. The amount of servitude, the amount of deference that the average person now has for the authorities is sickening. That they would listen to the government and just trust the government over doing their own research when they're talking about their kids' health. It truly is sickening. And like I said, I empathise with them. They're bombarded by propaganda literally every single day these days about vaccines and about those who question vaccines. I can understand how they fall into the trap, but let's take a step back and understand here. We're talking about their kids' health, and they would trust their kids' health to this sick government rather than do their own research. We're living in messed up times, and I'm so glad to see that most of our live listeners are aware of that. We have to move on to the third topic now. It does relate. It is the 2015 budget propaganda, and Lindsay, I know that you've been following this one closely.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, this is on the 7th of May in the Courier Mail, and the headline was Budgeting for Our Future, and it was an opinion piece by Scott Morrison, the Minister. I'll just read the quote. Quote, we must support families to retain and achieve their financial independence through access to work and study rather than entitlement-driven welfare. That is why childcare support is so important. It gives families choice. End of quote. This whole article was the usual motherhood statement and political pap we've come to expect from both sides of Australian political farce. The reason I raised this article is purely for Scott's use of the word entitlement. I went to the Oxford Pocket Dictionary and it was not there. Neither was it in the Oxford Concise, but the word entitled was there. It means give. An example is the book, the title of, give person, the title of sultan, etc., or give a person a claim to a thing or a claim to do something. So I went online to the Merriam-Webster online dictionary, and it gave the following definition. The condition of having a right to have, do, or get something. The feeling or belief that you deserve to be given something, such as special privileges, or a type of financial help provided by the government for members of a particular group. Excuse me. So it depends to which definition Scott refers. It seems to me to suggest the latter, which is a type of financial help provided by the government for members of a particular group. Now, I would like to suggest to him and all parliamentarians that their institution took all of our lawful money under the Commonwealth Constitution, and that was gold and silver coin, and so they are holding it in some form of trust for us. I refer also to the promissory notes we've been contributing at the rate of 7% of our taxable income since 1946. That was also to be held in trust for retirement, and the National Welfare Fund was established on the 1st of the 1st of 1946. A trust fund with Parliament as the trustee, and welfare claims were to be paid out of the fund. Now, Scott needs to understand that we receive welfare as a right, and the trustees need to understand that a thieving trustee stealing money from a trust is looked upon in a very bad light under the law of equity. Now, I think they need to have this driven home to them.
Well, for those of people who might not be aware, Lindsay is someone who follows the legalistic side of this, if you like. And Lindsay put together a piece for us maybe a month or two ago on the ARP, talking about how when the money system was changed to be what it is today, essentially a transfer of wealth took place from the people of Australia to the government or the state of Australia. And what Lindsay seems to be arguing here is that this is a continuance of that. They're essentially thieving from the people, but because they've done it essentially gradually, most people are completely oblivious to what's happened. But essentially, the money that's in your wallet is worth nothing. Most of us are aware of that. What people aren't aware of is that once upon a time, we did have a national stock in the country, in the nation's wealth. Lindsay, is that kind of where you're going with all of this?
Yeah, it is. But I think I was talking about presumptions before, and this is I'm concerned with this presumption. The way he projects it in his article suggests that we are all anything we get from the government is welfare that they are giving to us. And what he seems to neglect is that, no, you're a trustee and you're looking after our wealth and we're entitled to that wealth because it came from us in the first place.
Mm.
Now, do you understand? And this idea that, because when they made this welfare trust in 1946, they made it quite clear that this was being contributed by the people and therefore it would not be welfare, it would be what they've contributed and saved for. As a retirement fund or whatever, but it also was to look after the welfare of those who couldn't work. So and I want to keep bringing this back to them. They seem to have forgotten it because they took it off the tax return and it wasn't shown as a separate contribution. It was put into general revenue. They suddenly think now, after whatever it is, 30 or 40 years, that we've all forgotten about it. And I think they need to be reminded, no, we haven't forgotten. We know it's our money and we know that you are only a trustee. So stop trying to lie to us. That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, you make a good point. And as I always point out, if you read Orwell's Animal Farm, what happens in the story of Animal Farm? The mare that works hard its whole life and has been promised that if it works hard for the country or for the farm, then at the end of its life, it'll get to go out to pasture and enjoy retirement, and it'll get to eat the food that other people produce, and it's part of an overall system. The moment that the mare was too old to work, it was sent to the knackery, and that was the end of it. It's the pension that disappears the moment you go to collect it. And if young people today believe that they're putting their money into tax for welfare, you know, the old age pension when they get to old age, or they're putting their money into superannuation so they can retire in superannuation and live a good lifestyle, if they really believe that, then they've been well and truly conned, just like the animals in Animal Farm. It's simply not going to be there when you go to collect it. It'll disappear far sooner. And once you understand that superannuation is built on the stock market, and the stock market is one big Ponzi scheme, where if even a small percentage of people were to withdraw their capital at one time, the whole thing were to collapse. If you understood that, maybe you wouldn't be so keen to work your 40 hours a week and put money away for a rainy day, because when that rainy day comes, you better believe the money won't be there to protect you. Ethan, I'll throw back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. And I think you make a good point there. Going back to Lindsay, what you were speaking about there, you're absolutely right, and it's exactly what Orwell said, where they are destroying our language. They're destroying our language and manipulating us into believe not only this to manipulate that everyone is receiving welfare from the government, that we're dependent on the government, that the government is a parent-type figure, that we've been manipulated into it, when the reality is, what you're trying to say, Lindsay, we are contributing to that. They work for us, and we are entitled to have that. It's an entitlement, not a welfare from the state itself, and that's exactly what they've manipulated us into not believing it. And the tone of that piece that you read out there, Lindsay, tries to justify that. Again, we need to keep coming back to the main point, is that language is a very important thing, and this is what I took from the article. Language is an important thing, and when we get to a point where the language is used to paint the government, to paint whatever it is, whether it's police watching over the people instead of the police watching the people instead of watching over the people, the notion that most people don't even believe the government work for them anymore. They see the government as an authority figure over them. All of this, the way that it has been manipulated onto us, just as Lindsay has pointed out with this one example, we need to be very cautious of that, and we need to address this. Lindsay, am I somewhat on the right track?
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. But I think a lot of people don't understand the concept of a trust. You have a trustee, and he looks after it for you.
Yeah.
And that's what these people are. They're not even acting just as representatives. They're actually acting as trustees. And there's a set lot of rules laid down in equity of the duties of a trustee, and they've breached that trust. They should all be in jail. That's how I view it. And this nonsense that they're going on with now really upsets me. And like I've said to you before, I've gone to the local member here in my mother's electorate, and doesn't matter. I've asked them 4 times about these things, and I never get a reply. Never. They go, oh, go to the website, go here, go there, do this, fill this form out. Doesn't matter what I do, I never get a reply, because obviously they either don't want to or they can't, because they've done the wrong thing. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I won't go on about it, but it really is very important, because this is the money that we're contributing. This is 7% of all the income tax they collect each year. It's a lot of money. And they're trying to tell us that it doesn't exist. Anyway,
yeah, you're right.
I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you're right, Lindsay. You have every right to be, upset, because just as you said, they can't provide an answer, or they don't know, because once this transfer of wealth happened, just like I was speaking about with language, but on the physical, everything flipped to where it had been perceived that the state, as a trust, as you said, had now become the apparent figure. And that's one of the main issues with society today, is they believe that the government, they believe that these banks, they believe that these corporations are a parenting figure to them. They wouldn't do anything to harm me because they look after me by providing welfare, when no, in reality, it's not. They're not providing you with the welfare. We, the people, they are looking after a trust that is our money and is coming back to us. And that's a main thing that we need to get through to people, is that the power is in your hands, and we need to recognize that. We need to rediscover that and spread that word to people, Jono.
Yeah, and in the live chat, it's funny, every time we talk about the financial aspect, I'm so glad that Lindsay brings this stuff up, because clearly listeners do like to talk about this in the chat. I'm Another Aussie says that we're governed by banks, in his opinion, and at some point in the future I'll talk about the fact that as it stands right now, our government, with our taxes or our future taxes, have guaranteed our big 4 banks $380 billion in a bail-in. So before they even need the bailout, they've already been bailed in to meet Basel requirements, and I plan to do a big feature piece on that sooner rather than later. But if people understood, look at what happened in America, look at how when the banks failed, they were given money from the taxpayer, privatizing profits, socializing losses. If Australians understood that we already had that before the collapse has even come, there'd be riots in the streets, but they don't understand. They'll never understand, because they'll never be told by the mainstream media, and that's why we do this show, to try and get the message out to people who are listening. Ancestral Reflections, who I think is a new listener, says that the world's financials are one big Ponzi scheme. The world's been hijacked by archons. Now, unless archons is a euphemism for the chosen people, I don't quite agree with the second sentence, but the first one's certainly true, that the world's financials have been hijacked. They're using money as a form of slavery, and we'll talk more about that in the Q&A after the show. And Greg Williams says that government is the board of directors for the Australia Corporation. We've touched on this one before, Ethan, the fact that when I first heard that Australia is a corporation registered in New York, I thought that sounded crazy. So I looked into it, and it actually is a registered corporation in New York. It's not even hidden. It's there for anyone who seeks to look for it. But how many people have any idea about that? So I promise we'll spend more time talking about all of this in the Q&A after the show. But we do have to press on. Before we do, our live listeners might have noticed that there's another person who's joined us in the Hangout. That is, of course, Lucas, who's here to talk about Bitcoins. If you've joined us late, we've got a special guest on the show. Lucas from Bitcoin Brisbane will be talking about Bitcoins, cryptocurrency, digital security, all the rest of it. It's going to be a big piece. We'll get to that at the end of international, but we've got to press on with domestic. And the next topic for today, topic 4, is China's Australian property buying spree. Now, this is from the Sydney Morning Herald from the 7th of May 2015, so a few days ago. And I'll just read out a short blurb from it. It's entitled China's $60 billion Australian property splurge. Quote, Chinese investors and immigrants purchased more than $8 billion with a B dollars in Australian residential property in the space of 12 months, with growing demand forecast to pump another $60 billion into the market over the next 6 years. A Credit Suisse analyst released on Thursday shows Chinese purchased $8.7 billion in 2013-14, up 60% in the previous 12 months. The Chinese money pumped into Australian housing was the equivalent of 15% of the national housing supply, according to the report by analyst Hazen Tevfik. We expect $60 billion of additional Chinese demand for Aussie housing over the next 6 years to 2020. This will be more than double the $28 billion over the past 6 years, the report said. End quote. Now, as always, we provide links to all of these articles on AusRoundtable.com. I encourage you to go and read the articles for yourself because we just don't have time to read out the whole article to you right now. But let me reread one of those sentences from that very article. Quote, the Chinese money pumped into Australian housing was the equivalent of 15% of national housing supply. End quote. Now, if you can't see that this is madness, then you have lost your mind, and this country is in an awful lot of trouble. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I glimpsed something on the television the other night where Tony Abbott was saying that he was going to put a stop to this. But once again, I didn't get the details, and I find it very difficult for him to put a stop to it because he's let it get too far already. Because he's well aware of the effects this is having on the average Australian, because the average working person now cannot buy a house as a result of this. So I'll just see. Ethan might have heard him talking about this or seen something on it. So I'll throw to Ethan.
Yeah, mate, I did see that happening, and I did see him speak about that, and I had the same thoughts as well. Well, no, you as a puppet and the corporations that are funding behind you have allowed this to get to where it is, and they don't care about the people. They don't care that the people are struggling. They don't care that the people have not only just been brainwashed to believe that this is how things have been. We've spoken personally about this, how it's just been normalized. We're in $40,000 debt, that houses, we can't afford houses, that both parents have to work jobs. All of this degrading of society, pushing the middle class or the non-existent middle class anymore to the poor, so there's only the rich and the poor class. And this is just another example of how our sovereignty has been diminished a long time ago, Jono, but it's being allowed to happen because there's vested interest behind it, and this is just one scheme altogether in it, I reckon.
Well, I've said before that the whole deprogramming process, waking up process, call it whatever you want, we all end up where we are, going on a different path. And I sort of started my path a couple of years ago when I first learned how highly leveraged our banks were. And then I learned that our banks almost went down in 2008 with the Lehman Brothers collapse, when we'd been told that our banks are very well credentialed, very well capitalized, they hadn't made many mistakes, we were very safe here in Australia, we weren't affected, blah, blah, blah. But then I found out through reputable mainstream sources that in fact we came very close to oblivion, just as they did in other countries. And that's what started me doing my own research into the banking system, which led me to do more research into the overall financial system, the economic system. And here we are a couple of years later, and here I am doing this show with you guys right now. And so the whole financial aspect of things I've looked into very far, and I can tell you right now that if there was to be a sudden drop of just a few percent across housing prices in Australia, even though they're highly overpriced right now, you can make that argument, whatever. The thing is, if they were to drop, no matter if they're overpriced or underpriced or good price now, if the average price was to drop just a few percent between now and a few months from now, our entire system is at risk of collapse because our banks are so highly leveraged. And most OECD countries, their banks do about a third of their lending into residential real estate, and the rest is into commercial and other areas. In Australia, 2/3 of our big four bank lending goes to the real estate market. Now, that in and of itself is messed up, but then when you understand the implications of that, what would happen if their assets, the things that they're lending money to, the homes, if they was to suddenly drop in value, you can see this whole system is so rigged, our government can't afford to not let this investment happen. So they'll sing and they'll dance and they'll say that they're going to do something about it. But the reality is, if you're a young person right now and you haven't already bought your house, then you have been sold out, my friend, and you need to stop supporting Labor and Liberal and the Greens, and you need to rise up and realize you've been sold out, you'll never be bought back in, it's all over for you. You're not getting a house, or at least if you do, you're not getting it for less than 25, 30 years of your slavery and your partner's slavery. You're done. It's finished. And if you can't see that right now, you'll probably never see it. It's time to open your eyes. And I can assure you we'll be covering this more in future episodes. But it is time to move on to the next topic for today. And topic number 5 is to do with climate change honesty. And this is a very pleasant little change up of pace. Now, after months of postponing my climate change scam feature piece due to other news and events constantly creeping up and taking our limited time on the show, over the past 2 weeks, episodes 29 and 30, I finally managed to share with the audience my views on and my research into the climate change scam. In simple terms, the sea levels are not rising because the Earth is not warming, and the entire charade is a clever ploy to convince humans to live on less, give more power and more money to the state, and forget about real environmental issues. Now, I was pleased to see this during the week. I'm going to read out a quote from The Age down there in Melbourne. This is entitled, "Climate Change, a UN-led ruse says Tony Abbott's business advisor, Maurice Newman. This is from the 8th of May 2015, so a couple of days ago. I'm going to read out a lengthy quote from the article, then we'll get into a discussion, so just bear with me. Quote, "Climate change is a hoax led by the United Nations so that it can end democracy and impose authoritarian rule, according to Prime Minister Tony Abbott's chief business advisor. Maurice Newman, the chairman of the Prime Minister's Business Advisory Council, has written in The Australian, that's a Murdoch paper by the way, that scientific modelling showing the link between humans and climate change is wrong, and the real agenda is a world takeover for the UN. It's a well-kept secret, but 95% of the climate models we are told prove the link between human CO2 emissions and catastrophic global warming have been found after nearly 2 decades of temperature stasis to be in error. It's not surprising," Mr. Newman wrote on Friday. Mr. Newman continued that global warming was a hook to install a new world order. Figueres, who is a character involved in all of this, is on record saying democracy is a poor political system for fighting global warming. Communist China, she says, is the best model, he said. This is not about facts or logic. It's about a new world order under the control of the UN. He then urges the Abbott government to oppose a regime that was against capitalism and freedom by resisting the next global climate treaty in Paris, which countries hope to reach in December, end quote. Now, isn't this a refreshing change to hear a prominent figure in business or politics telling the truth for once? I almost couldn't believe it. And you better believe that the article, this is from The Age, down in Melbourne, was quick to add, quote, "The vast majority of the world's scientists, including most of the world's scientific academies, agree humans are causing climate change," end quote. Now, these would be the same people exposed during ClimateGate in 2009 to be manipulating data, burying evidence that they didn't like, and ostracizing scientists who didn't agree to go along with the climate change scam. That's the vast majority. And of course, the populace is so dumbed down today that they think that science is about majority opinion rather than about being actual science and the scientific method. Now, I've been meaning to spend more time discussing these sorts of matters, but before I go any further, I want to throw to you there, Ethan. What do you say about all of this?
Thanks, Jono. I was astounded when I saw this article. I actually read his piece himself from The Australian, and I was astounded. I got it sent to me, but I thought it was going to be one of those sites like Russia Today or some of these sites that aren't mainstream media here in Australia. But then I just did a simple search for it, and it came straight up that all of these mainstream press outlets were covering this, and not just covering it, but they were covering it in the title saying, ClimateGate, a UN hoax to destroy democracy, Tony Abbott's chief business advisor says. All of this stuff, and I was astounded that this was getting mainstream press because they've tried so hard to demonize people, to introduce courses at the University of Queensland to combat climate change denial, and here they have someone which hopefully within the eyes of the public can be deemed a legitimate person, can be deemed a credible way to discern this information. They're giving him time to write a piece and then giving that piece coverage rather than burying it. It was astounding. It was extremely refreshing, Jono, and I thought that was probably the most important news story of the week that I had seen. Just the fact that this was getting attention.
Yeah, and we're at the point now where so much of what's published in the mainstream media, including in the Murdoch press, I should say, is complete and utter climate change scam propaganda. That when I read this article, I had to check the URL in my bar to make sure it wasn't some kind of satirical piece. This is actually legitimately what was said by the Prime Minister's advisor, which has to give you some kind of hope. Lindsay, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I hadn't heard this. In the car the other night, I heard all these Greens and other hangers-on going off their brain about Tony Abbott's got to sack this bloke, and I didn't know what it was about. I only heard the opposition coming in. I didn't realise who it was and what he'd said. So that brings it all in perspective now. They were really, really upset. So he must have done a bit of a job on them then. So that's, in some ways, that's good, because if they're upset, he's being successful.
Well, we've got about 50 people listening live right now. In the live chat, we had a couple of comments. Rorschach says that some girl in his class did a speech in English. Rorschach's one of our high school listeners, and this girl's speech was, "Climate change is real." She provided no facts to back it up because they don't exist, and you can bet that girl would have got a good mark for that. And you can bet that she would have been the good kid, one of the good kids in the class for caring about climate change, because all the teachers written on this because they don't know any better. They've been brainwashed the same as everyone else. I'm Another Aussie says that it's all about Agenda 21 and total human control. I couldn't agree with him more. I plan to speak more about this in future episodes. Of course, over the last 2 weeks, I just established the facts that the sea levels aren't rising. We've been lied to. There are eminent people who will admit this publicly, and it's all a big scam. I didn't go one step further and explain what their total plan is, but of course it is total human control. A few more comments. Adam Bravo, I think, and he's one of our good loyal listeners, I think he's taken issue with me saying that they're using climate change as a way to convince the masses to have less. And I think he's saying, living on less is a good thing, isn't it? Contributing less to the system that way. Yeah, I think in the system the way that it currently is, I try and earn less than most people and spend less than most people. And I think that's a better way, if you can get away with it, to lead your life. What I'm talking about here is, and this goes to what Another Aussie was saying about the Agenda 21 plan, they don't plan for you to just have less than the average person today. They plan for you to have less than you can imagine right now. We've already got too much as far as they're concerned. We're useless eaters, and when they have it their way, there'll be less of us, and we'll be living on the bare bones, just like in 1984, where everyone is struggling to find razor blades. That's how it's going to be in the end, because the people who really rule the world don't give a stuff about us. In fact, many of them openly hate us, and that's what they've got planned. Not just less than what we've got now. We're talking much, much, much less. That's their plan. And like I always say, the trend is your friend. And what's the trend right now? The middle class is being decimated. The wealth is all going to a smaller and smaller group of people at the top. This is flat-out communism, straight out of the book that we always talk about, the book that I'll link to at AWST.com. If you go and check for yourself, this is all planned a long time ago, and they're slowly affecting it, and you better believe the whole climate change scam is a part of that. I'll read a few more comments in a moment. Before I do, Ethan, I'll throw back to you there. I did spend the last couple of weeks talking about climate change. It took us longer to talk about it than we should have, but I'm glad that we did, because it gave me more time to do more research. And I can see this isn't just about scientists making some money and certain political groups managing to split up the environmental movement. This truly is a plan for global enslavement. What say you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I was glad also that we got the chance to do that, and that's why this article that we read out this week, and again, we'll leave all our links at ausroundtable.com for you to check and verify for yourself, so you can see his piece from the Australian, you can see other mainstream media outlets that have been covering it, and that's why it was so astounding to me reading this article, because not only was he saying that it's a hoax, he was saying that there is an agenda behind it, an agenda to destroy democracy, an agenda to bring in a new world order. And this is being published, an opinion piece like this being published in the Australian, a Murdoch press paper that's widely circulated, national newspaper, and it's being republished in Sydney Morning Herald, Fairfax, all over the world, and SBS, and even international websites were picking it up. And as Lindsay said, he heard all the backlash from it. But you'd think, and we've seen this from previous precedents, that he normally would have the ability to write something like this if he wished, but no one else would generally pick up on it, would go back. That's why I introduced the Spotlight section at tottnews.com, was to bring some of these articles to the forefront, that they had been buried behind this propaganda. But it was just astounding, Johnno, that not only did he say, and not only was it was widespread amongst the media, but he also said there was an agenda behind it, and you bet your bottom dollar there is.
Yeah, there certainly is, and the further you look into it, the more obvious it becomes, and we'll spend more time talking about this topic as the weeks progress, because you can see in the rhetoric coming out of Barack Obama that this is something that they're planning to work on. I think it's within a couple of years they're going to try and nut down a binding agreement so that more national sovereignty is usurped, that you have to agree to certain limits to carbon emissions or whatever. Who decides what the limits are? Who decides how you measure them? Who gets to trade in all the permits? There's so much money to be made in all of this. The money won't be made by the peasants. It'll be taken from the peasants. And we're going to try and expose that. We do have to move on now. Now, I was planning to do a big feature piece on more Jewish alleged child sex abuse. There's a case taking place down in Melbourne at the moment, and I've done a fair bit of research into it. And if you thought what happened at the Royal Commission into Child Sex Abuse earlier in the year was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. But I'm going to save that piece for next week, because we're already an hour into the show and we've still got more to get through. Plus, we have a special guest to talk to later on the show. So I'm going to save that one for next week. But make sure you tune in next week. I've got some bombshells for you. But we'll move on to the international segment now. And the first topic for international, Lindsay, is to do with Jimmy Saville and the report into him being shelved. Take it away.
Okay, just after what you've just said, did you want to combine that, leave that over for a week and combine that with yours? Because it refers to sex abuse with children, or do you want me to keep going?
No, you might as well go ahead with it, mate. It's an interesting story. Take it away.
Okay, this is in the Courier Mail, and on the 3rd of May, and the headline read, London, a report into Jimmy Saville's abuse of up to 1,000 children at the BBC has been shelved at the request of police. And quote, Dame Janet Smith has completed her 2-year inquiry into Saville, and her findings were due to be published this month. But yesterday, she reluctantly announced it would be delayed at the request of the Metropolitan Police owing to, quote, ongoing sex abuse investigations. Last night, victims were said to be furious at the shock announcement, end of quote. Now, they probably have got much to be furious about. Just recently, a US judge has ordered that the lurid, quote, sex allegations relating to an underage female made against Prince Andrew, and which led to a major crisis for the royal family, be thrown out, and the alleged victims of Lord Janna of Braunstone are considering launching a legal action against the Director of Public Prosecution's decision not to put the peer on trial for sex abuse. Press reports suggested over a long period that Jimmy Saville was a close associate of the royal family. Now, I wonder about the long-term safety of this new princess that was just born, Charlotte, I think the name was, and her brother, living in such a toxic environment. To me, it's a real concern. Now, I know this is probably, I can get into trouble for saying that, but there's been too much deflection and too many pedophiles close to the royal family. I'll throw that back to you, Johnno.
Oh, don't throw it back to me when I'm on mute and I'm trying to chat with the live chat there. Nah, you're right, mate. That's all good. Yeah, so Jimmy Saville, look, we've touched on this in previous episodes, the fact that these child pedophilia rings seem to be used for two main purposes. One is because many of the people who reach the highest echelons of politics and business and banking are just fundamentally sick people, and this is what they get off on. But it seems like there's another element of it, and it's for power and control. And if you can get dirt on people, then you can essentially own people. So for one typical example, a politician gets elected as a member of parliament or whatever. They're invited to a party. Some things happen. Next thing you know, they're doing something they weren't planning to do. Next thing you know, there's some information against them that can be released whenever the powers that be want to release it. So they say, listen, you toe the line and you'll be all right. And next thing you know, you're involved in a child pedophilia ring. It's that simple. It's easy to imagine that it works this way. There are many witness testimonies who say that it works this way. And it looks as though this Jimmy Saville case is straight up and down another piece of that puzzle. Lindsay, I'll throw back to you.
Okay. I've got a document that was given to me. Last week on your Sunday show, we had a man who'd been a Mason, and he came out and he said, yes, I've been in the Masonic Lodge and I've left it now, etc., etc. And it prompted me because I think he was talking about the Rose Cross, Red Cross or whatever it was, brand of Masonic Lodge. So I went back and checked on this document, and sure enough, the more I got into it, it brought up all sorts of information about royal family and peers, etc., who are involved in a whole line of stuff, not just Masons, but virtually owning Australia. So I would like to recommend that people read that too, because that might bring some of this into more perspective of what a background there is that we never ever hear of, that's really well hidden. And from what I can understand, the fellow that wrote this, it's an 88-page booklet. He died straight after it, so there's a possibility of foul play there as well. So I mean, I've brought this up before. There's so much, just what you've just said. There's so much nonsense going on behind the scenes of Satanism, pedophilia, drinking blood, eating human flesh, the whole deal. And we never ever see any light of it at all in the mainstream press. It's always covered up. So there's a huge area for us to investigate there, but we'll have to be careful because these people don't muck about. That's the other thing I think we need to be of concern about. So I'll throw that to Ethan and see what he has to say about all this.
Yeah, it's concerning stuff, Lindsay, and I wanted to speak about 2 points that you brought up there. The first one was to bring up that carrying on from the previous segment, we want to talk about some of these agendas behind it. These are the type of people, this royal elite, this 1%, whatever you want to call it, that have the power, that have the money, that have the control. Not, in my opinion, not just on the physical level, but I think there's something greater there beyond, in terms of their control. But if you look at this, these are the type of people that are mingling with each other, that have been exposed throughout the British Parliament, throughout the royal family doing these atrocities, through Jimmy Savile. They've been exposed as Satanists and pedophiles, and have been doing a lot of shady business there. These are the people that have the money and control, and that's what you need to look at. This is what you need to reinforce to people. So when you see all of these issues that we're talking about, you need to look at the source reference, and you need to see where it's coming from. And if it's coming from people like this, you know that there must be foul intentions behind it. And the second point is, Lindsay, you brought up that you had concerns for the new princess that was born, and his brother being in her brother being in a toxic environment like this. And I completely agree, because I believe through generations, if you raise a child to believe that you are superior to other human beings, they're going to believe that, because they haven't seen an outside world, they haven't seen a different perspective to know that that is not the way to go. So if the new princesses or whatnot are brought up in this toxic environment, it's just going to continue this cycle of control. So I guess the main premise of what I was trying to respond here with is that we do have sick people that are in power. We have sick people that are mingling together, converging, and it's time for the people to recognize this, to recognize that every topic we talk about has an agenda behind it. Look at who has the agenda behind it, and try to address it, try to spread the word, and realize that there's something much bigger going on. There's a deeper agenda here, and we must do everything we can to fight it, Jono.
And what I'll do is, on AusRoundtable.com, obviously we always provide all the links to all of our information for people to check for themselves, and there's a number of reasons why you should do that. Firstly, to make sure that what we're saying is true. You can never trust anyone 100%. You have to do your own research and verify what they're saying, but also because when you do your own research, you're more likely to retain the information. And thirdly, because we can't go over all the information in 1 2-hour show. So sometimes we just read out snippets of what we've got. You read the full article for yourself, and you'll learn more than we can hope to share with you on this show. What I'll do is, on AusRoundtable.com, for this segment, I'll also provide links to 2 separate podcasts. One will be from the Higher Side Chats, and one will be from Max Resistance from a couple of months ago when they had on Ed Opperman. And the 2 guests in particular that you need to listen to, they're both, I think, 2-hour podcasts. These are people who publish books, who do live broadcasts, and prominent people who talk about these things and how far this perversion goes, also into the mainstream pop culture industry, music and film and what have you, how far it goes, how open it is, the revelations that came out of that boy that had to do with Michael Jackson, and then things that he said about other people that most people never seem to have heard or seem to have forgotten, people who they're connected to, their ties to the royal family. All the information is there. These guys have never been sued or anything, because everything that they say is easily verified and true. You have to understand, this sick perversion, it's not just one dodgy MP, it's not just one dodgy member of the royal family. We're talking about a mass system, and Jimmy Savile is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you think that people didn't know about Jimmy Savile and everything that he did until he died, then you've got rocks in your head. It's so obvious. It's a massive pedophilia ring that is used not just for their sexual gratification, but also for control. And when people say, "Oh, how can the government lie and the media not report it?" or "How can the media? How can they?" You need to start thinking for yourself here. How come people won't speak? Because people have dirt on them, and there is so much of this going on. You have to understand that's one of the tactics that they use to keep the control grid as strong as they do and as sturdy as they do. And we're just lucky in a way that this is starting to come to the fore with people like Savile and some of these revelations coming out, because now more of us who never would have believed it are starting to see this is actually legitimate. And that's one of the things that got me onto this. When I started looking into the Savile case, I was like, wow, if Savile was doing all these things he's alleged to have done and that no one's denying he's done, and he did it over and over and over again while he was in the employ of the BBC, then there must be more people who knew about it who didn't report about it. And then your mind starts to open up to this idea that, wow, there's a group of people out there who don't care about the truth, who don't care about getting you the truth. All they care about is keeping their jobs, keeping their money, keeping their power. That's exactly what they do, and these child sex rings are all a part of that. I'll throw it back to you there, Lindsay, for your final thoughts, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah. Well, my final thoughts are exactly what you've just said. I can't elaborate on that. It is rotten, and we've got to get to the core of it. And no doubt we will over the next month or so. We will deal with this. That's it.
All right, mate. Well, then we'll move on to the final topic for international before we get on to the big Bitcoin discussion. And the second and final topic for international today is to do with the Baltimore psyop that's currently taking place and some of the mirrors that you've seen between that and the French Revolution, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks for that. The Courier Mail on the 3rd of May had a headline called "Police to Face Death Counts." And basically, the article on Baltimore this week seems to me to be little more than another vehicle to show large pictures of rioters, or as last week there was a mother slapping a son. basically what we are left with after 2 weeks of Courier Mail headlines is, quote, raging rampage, we won't go away, mother of riots, Baltimore erupts in fury, and now we have this police-to-face death counts. Last month, you, Johnno, asked me something about the French Revolution, my opinion on it, or something like that. So last week I went and I read a large section of the book called The French Revolution by Nestor H. Webster, and it was published in 1919. And I put together this talk on some of the surprises I found. I've enclosed a link to the digital copy of the book and also to a website where a physical copy can be purchased within Australia. So with the French Revolution, it seemed to be three fields working at once. You had Frederick of Prussia, and then you had the recently informed Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt, and a group of debauched rich nobles who hated the French king because they perceived he slighted them in some way, and more particularly the Queen on a personal level, because they tried to drop the wood on her and she told them where to go. And we always hear about, you know, she was a horrible person, but she obviously had some integrity. Now for the connection to Baltimore. On page 33 of this book on the Revolution, it says, quote, it was now that the morrow's march on Versailles was publicly announced on the pretext of the scarcity of bread, the desire of avenging the national cockade, and of bringing the king to Paris. By these means, the movement, like the one that had preceded the siege of Bastille, was made to appear spontaneous, an uncontrollable rising of the people that the leaders were powerless to subdue. But at the Duke d'Orléans' house at Passy, the march had already been planned, and the elements of the mob was to be composed, arranged by the conspirators. Now, on page 161, you have the point that Louis XVI failed to realise was that the revolutionary mob which marched on Versailles was not the people at all, but an assembly composed of impostors, both male and female, and of hired rabble from the faubourgs. The only element that could be described as representing the people were those poor women forced against their will to march. On page 181, quote, the same thing had been attempted the year before when women were sent to incite the crowd to violence, but their efforts had proved unavailing, and the king had set forth upon his journey amidst the acclamations of the Parisians and cries of bon voyage au bon papa. I think that means good trip, good father. Those words don't actually sound like an angry mob. So the similarity in Baltimore is that the mainstream media are whipping this into a major race riot. I would like now to introduce two YouTube videos, the first of which is the Mayor Rawlings Blake, who didn't talk about the riots. She told the Baltimore Police Department to stand down and, quote, give those who wish to destroy space to do that, end of quote. And my first thing was, does that sound odd? Maybe she's protecting paid actors from police assault. That was my first reaction. The second video is of a member of a number of black gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, and they were talking to 11 News in America, saying they did not make a truce with each other to harm police officers. They are basically saying the riot is not gang-led, and they are actually being attacked, trying to stop the riots. Now, my reservations about the motivations of gang members is overcome by the fact that they don't seem to see this destruction to be in their interest. And the similarities of this situation to the situation in the French Revolution, as cited above, from whom was the mayor taking orders, and how many of these riots and police shooting black incidents are set up to inflame and divide the American society? It just seems like we've just had another one before that, and there was a Negro from that town giving evidence to say that all the rioters coming in here, none of them are local, they're all imports, and it just seems to be an ongoing thing. Each incident you have, which they try to beat up into a race riot, seems to be a staged effect, just like the French Revolution. I'll leave, there are many more things, many more connections between the French Revolution and what's happening today, but they're not really of interest to this riot. So I'll leave that as enough, and maybe later on when we're talking about depopulation and what have you, found from the French Revolution. And I'll throw that back to you, Johnno.
Yeah, well, in the live chat, Silver Slave 333 says, destroy small business, keep away from the banks, government buildings and Walmart, and that's how I feel about this as well. If these riots were real, why would they be focusing on tangential targets rather than going for the root cause of the problem? It's a bit like how ISIS is meant to be this extreme Muslim terrorist group, but they never go near Israel, and that alone should be enough to tell you that the whole thing is a farce and a joke. Same thing with these so-called riots. It seems to me like it's largely media fakery, media exaggeration, and clear up and down, straight black and white psyop. It's obvious what's happening here, and I'm glad that you picked up on the ties to the French Revolution, because what people have to understand is if you look into history, this isn't the first time this has happened. This isn't the second, third, 10th, 20th time. This has been the strategy for much longer than most of our bloodlines we can trace back, and they're doing it to us again. And at least with the internet now, we should be smart enough to look at how it's happened at other times and other places and see that they're just singing from the same song sheet. I'll throw to you there, Ethan. We lost you for a moment, but can you hear us again?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for that, Jono. I think, first of all, I want to thank Lindsay for making the connections there and bringing that back up. And you're right, Jono, that was the point that I was going to bring up, is that this has been happening for a lot longer than a lot of people realise. Even I'm sure most of us can even realise to trace it back, because history has been so manipulated. But these tactics, nothing new, and I think what Lindsay was trying to say there was how many different diverse influences and manipulation were involved within the French Revolution. It's the same today, and I think that's exactly right. I think there are a lot of mirroring similarities between the French Revolution and the Baltimore Riots today, and they all serve an agenda, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the riots. That's exactly why we're seeing on one hand, the media talking about this, on another hand, the media talking about that, pushing this agenda, pushing that agenda, hitting multiple birds with one stone at the same time, as they like to do with every agenda. And this is nothing new, and people need to first of all, in my opinion, become familiarized with history, understand that, for example, when we talk about some of these false flag attacks that happen, we say, hang on, do you know that it's been documented that the CIA, not on large scales, but just on documented records, have done over 1,100 false flag attacks to justify their agenda. It's just what they do. It's protocol to do this. Now, this is exactly what's happening. So I hope people familiarize themselves with history, familiarize themselves with some of the tactics that got these people into power, that established some of these empires, that crumbled some of these empires, and look at how they're doing it today, and look at how they've learnt from the past and are using it today. Because they say, for those who don't know history, you're bound to repeat it. They know history, and they've learned from the mistakes of the past, and they are going to manipulate it to where they can win. And if we don't know history, or if we don't know the similarities, we don't know their tactics, Jono, we're not going to win. And that's why I thank Lindsay so much for bringing that in and pointing out those similarities, because we've got a much bigger fight here on our hand than just representatives in a parliament or things that you see on the TV, Jono.
It's important, Ethan, that we don't just look at their tactics, that we look at their strategies. And if you don't know the difference between tactics and strategies, you need to read Sun Tzu, Art of War. Thank you, Lindsay. I tripped over my words there. Yeah, you need to understand the difference between tactics and strategies. And what we're seeing right now in Baltimore is their tactic of pitting one group against the other, getting the media to convince people that something's bigger than it is. But what's the strategy? Well, the overall strategy is to pit people against each other by getting people living together when they maybe shouldn't be living together in the first place. And if you look at what's happening in Australia today, these Reclaim Australia rallies, what's that all about? Well, that's all a 100% Zionist plot to pit white Australians against Muslims. But what's the problem? Is halal food really the problem in Australia right now? Of course it isn't. The problem is mass migration. Who's behind the mass migration? The very same people who want the whites to get angry at the Muslims and to forget the elephant in the room. And that's their strategy. And that's one of the reasons why we have to be wary of the mass immigration that's taking place into Australia and other places all around the white Western world, all white countries and only white countries, for this very reason, so that when the time is right, they can get us to turn on each other. And it's like the old saying, with a melting pot, You only have to turn up the stove a little bit and it starts to boil over, and that's exactly what their strategy is. Get us all living together as separate groups and then get us to turn on each other so they can introduce a police state, so they can get us to focus on each other rather than focus on the real thieves at the top who are stealing from us every single day. And we are going to spend more time talking about the Baltimore psyop in future episodes, Lindsay, but I'll give you a moment now to give us your final thoughts, and then we'll move on to the special guest.
Okay, I'm just thinking now, as you're talking about that, of something else I read in that book by Ernesto Webster. And at the time of the French Revolutions, they were talking about reducing the population in France by half, just killing off wholesale areas of people. And I just thought about when you were talking about climate change. I know they're talking about, with climate change, they want to reduce the numbers. They want to get rid of air conditioning. They want to get rid of golf courses and all sorts of sporting areas. They've got a whole plan. And when you look at this, you think, yeah, this isn't new either. This has come from the time of the French Revolution. So for those people who think that climate change is something airy-fairy, no, it's all part and parcel of this same thing going back hundreds of years, this same philosophy that these people are working under. I'll just leave it at that. And I would urge people to try and read this book. I think it's a wonderful book to get an idea of what's gone on before. Thanks for that, John.
Said. And I think this episode, what's this, episode 31, we probably could have done a slightly better job of tying it all in together or making the ties more clear. But I guess once you've done enough research into all of this, you can see that whether we're talking about the federal budget, or we're talking about the climate change scam, or we're talking about vaccinations, or we're talking about the Baltimore psyop, you can see that all of these things tie directly together, and it's the same corrupt cabal that's behind all of this at different levels with different groups and different names. It's the same small, tiny little group of people at the top who are trying to control the rest of us for their own ends. And if you're a new listener to this show or you're not familiar with all this, I'm sure this does sound outlandish and crazy. It would have sounded outlandish and crazy to me even just 2 or 3 years ago. But if you take the time to do your own research, you will realize that we are very much at war. And sadly, it's an informational war that we are losing for the most part at the moment. But that's where platforms like this come in so handy, where we can start to get the message out there. We've got 50 people in the live chat. They're talking about this in the live chat. They're spreading ideas, spreading messages. People are starting to get the picture, and what we need to do is to spread that picture as far and wide as we can, as soon as we can, because it's pretty clear that the iron grip of world domination is slowly closing on us, and we don't have much time to get the truth out there, and that's what we're trying to do. But it is time to put a line under the international segment for today. We do have a very special guest with us, and we're going to be discussing Bitcoins. Now, this is the first time that we've had Lucas on the show, but what you should know, Lucas, is that we've had a number of people in the live chat, including one of my favorite commenters, Silver Slave, talking about Bitcoins for months now. We've been promising to get a special guest on the show. We're so glad you could finally join us. So take yourself off mute there, Lucas, and introduce yourself to the audience of the Australian Roundtable Podcast.
Oh, thanks for the intro, Johnno. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so my name's Lucas. I run the Bitcoin meetup here in Brisbane, where we just talk about the alternative cryptocurrency called Bitcoin and what it can enable.
Oh, straight to the point there, mate. Now, I should say to the listeners, you actually were on Channel 10 News, which is a commercial outlet here in Australia, one of the 3 commercial broadcasters, and a number of our listeners believe that basically anyone who gets on the TV must be bought and sold. So do you want to say to some of the skeptics out there listening right now that you're just a regular bloke who got into Bitcoin a little while ago and is very passionate about it?
Yeah. So I guess Bitcoin kind of fell in my lap. I work in software engineering. I study math and have an interest in finance and money in general. So kind of just in that Venn diagram, I guess I just fit right in the middle. So yeah, I just got an email from Channel 10, and they said, do you want to do a piece on Bitcoin? So happy to send those emails through, and yeah, we just did a little bit of a shoot, and we had to dumb it down obviously for the Channel 10 audience on what it was about. But yeah, we just had I guess a 1 minute, 2 minute segment on Bitcoin and mining basically.
Terrific. Well, what we'll do is I'll ask you just a few leading questions to give the listeners a basic background on yourself, and then we'll move into discussing the basis of Bitcoins. I'm sure many of our listeners are pretty well versed in the notion of Bitcoin, but we'll start from the start when we get to that. But with you there, Lucas, do you want to explain to the listeners basically what you do with Bitcoin Brisbane and how you first got into it?
Yeah, sure. Well, full disclaimer, I own Bitcoin. Now, people say that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scam, and like you say, it's up to you to do your own research. So like I said, I own Bitcoin, so it's obviously some people will say, well, it's on me to spread it so my investment goes up. But I'm here just to provide information about it, trying to explain it. It is very technical, but because I'm a software engineer, I've read the source code and I understand it from a protocol level. So that's what Bitcoin Brisbane is about, is to try and bridge the gap between the tech and the software to to the masses and to what people can understand and how to use it.
And Bitcoin Brisbane, for the listeners who aren't aware, there's a website called meetup.com, and basically through this meetup you can sign up, and there's all kinds of groups in most major cities. In Brisbane there's tons of them, whether it's a knitting group or a beer drinking group or a Bitcoin group or a philosophy group or a coffee group. There's all different kinds of groups, and the idea is that you sign up to one of these groups, you go to one of their meetings, meet new people, make new friends, and I think it's a fantastic platform. And that's how I actually first met Lucas, was when I went to one of these Bitcoin meetups. And basically, Lucas, what you do is you run an information session for newcomers and for I guess old timers in the Bitcoin group, so you get to meet other Bitcoiners and learn about some of the basics behind it. Is that a fair summation of what you do with that meetup?
Yeah, that's right. So it is a complicated topic, and it took me quite a while to understand it. But like I said, because I'm a software engineer, I think I have a bit of a leg up on the common man because I can read the source code. So what I'm trying to do is just educate people and maybe stop them making the same mistakes I made, and just being a resource to ask or answer any questions around it. So I try and run a topic that's pretty focused, be it mining, accepting payments, how the software works, and just try and give a 1-hour lecture on the different components of Bitcoin.
Well, what we'll do is I've got a few more questions for you, then we'll go around the panel, and I should say
Sure.
to the live listeners, of which there's about 50 at the moment, we will go to your questions from the live chat to throw to Lucas later on in the show. But for now, Lucas, if you were talking to someone who had heard of Bitcoin but still didn't really understand it properly, if you could explain to them in 2 or 3 minutes what it is and why you believe in it, what would you say to them?
Okay, well, I guess a good analogy is it's like cash on the internet. So it has a lot of properties like cash, being peer-to-peer and I guess irreversible as well. So when you make a payment, that payment is, for all intents and purposes, one way and irreversible, and it goes from a person A straight to person B without any other actors involved. So I guess there are a couple of the properties that make Bitcoin an attractive alternative currency from fiat.
Well, that was 30 seconds flat, mate. You'd make a good guest on the Sunday sessions. Well, look, I've got a few more questions for Lucas. Before we go any further, I should throw to you there, Lindsay. Anything you want to ask Lucas about Bitcoin?
No, I know very little about it, so I'm just happy to listen to anything he says to get a bit of an idea.
And Ethan, I know that you're into following some of these trends within cryptocurrency and what have you. I want to get into a more broader philosophical discussion about money and how we use it later on. But just on the basics of Bitcoin, anything you want to ask Lucas at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Johnno, and g'day to Lucas over there. Thanks for joining us on the Australian Roundtable. For me, it's been a tough research process in terms of understanding Bitcoin. I've had a lot of people give me different perceptions on what they believe about cryptocurrencies, about what they believe in terms of whether it's safe and secure. I just wanted to ask you from a software engineer standpoint about the fundamental mechanisms of Bitcoin. Could you explain to some people like myself that aren't entirely familiar with it how Bitcoin works? Is it centralized or on a peer-to-peer basis? How does the fundamental basis of Bitcoin stay secure and independent from falling into the same traps as the current financial system?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Now, because I work in this space and have been for the last 3 years, I forget that I've kind of focused my I'm very focused in this. So if my answers are too specific, please pull me up on it. If I need to take a step back, by all means ask. So there's a couple of things that make Bitcoin secure. It's basically public key, private key encryption, or that secures your Bitcoins, and it goes through a number of what they call cryptographic hash functions, which are by design one way. So you cannot yield the private key from the Bitcoin public key. And maybe a better analogy is to think of a private key and a public key as maybe like a password on your email account. So you need the private key to be able to transact in Bitcoin, and that's what secures what secures your Bitcoin. Now, how it works is once you sign that transaction, you broadcast that to the Bitcoin network via peer-to-peer, and that transaction then replicates through the entire Bitcoin network, through all the nodes, and goes into what you call a block. Now, blocks are by design 10 minutes in duration, and what a block does is basically prevents the problem of what you call a double spend. Now, if you can think about it like a check, I can post a check to two people, and without those two actors knowing each other, we don't know which check is valid or which one will bounce. So what happens is the network over that 10 minutes will propagate, that transaction will propagate throughout the entire network to stop what you call a double spend. So without a central actor like PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, preventing a double spend is very hard, and that is what the Bitcoin revolution is about, is how you technically solve a double spend transaction. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. As I said, I've done a little research into it. I'm glad that you could confirm to me that it is peer-to-peer. I wanted to ask about being anonymous and the transactions, because I had heard that the transactions or the keywords are stored for every transaction, and you know, there's somewhat of a problem there. Just in terms of that form of thing, it has been presented to me that it is easier to track who is communicating with who is doing this, if you know the certain keywords or the certain receipt numbers or whatever the code is that they send the transaction through. So again, I'm coming from a standpoint of someone who is not entirely familiar with Bitcoin, but I have had people raise these concerns in discussions. Could you elaborate on anything that I've just said there?
Yeah, sure. That is a concern. Every transaction that has ever been is known by everyone on the network. But unless there is a link between personally identifiable information and your Bitcoin address, then for all intents and purposes, it is anonymous. Now, a link could be, you know, your IP address of your computer. It could be if you socialize that Bitcoin address on an email, etc., etc. But what is possible with Bitcoin, unlike an email account, you can spin up 10,000 Bitcoin addresses per second off a computer. So to get around anonymity, you'd never use the same address. You can actually say, hey, instead of taking one Bitcoin, I could give you 100 addresses, and you could pass me 1/100th of a Bitcoin to each of those addresses. So there are mechanisms to protect against anonymity. There are also services that can mix those, what they call mixing services or laundry services, that will hide the source of the transaction, hide the parties. But by all means, if you socialize your address and you use that for nefarious purposes, then there is a direct link back to you.
Okay, yep. All right, well, fantastic. Thanks for clearing those things up there.
Yeah, my plan was to focus first on Lucas, give him a chance to introduce himself and his bona fides, a man who's been on Channel 10, and also down to the Senate hearings, which we'll speak about in a moment. Then I thought we'd spend the second section talking about Bitcoin specifically, and then get into a broad discussion about cryptocurrency, cryptography, online security, and those kinds of things. So just sticking with the Bitcoin there, Lucas, I've got a few comments from the live chat that they wanted me to ask you, so I'll throw them at you now. Firstly, Justice for Germans asked, he said that he's thinking of purchasing some Bitcoins, but he wanted to know if you can, and if you can, how you go about it, getting around the GST. Do you want to explain to the listeners what is happening with the laws, the tax laws here in Australia, and what happened at those Senate committee hearings that you went to?
Yeah, sure. Again, I'm not a tax accountant, but basically what the government were trying to do is what they're calling double taxing. So when you purchase a Bitcoin, you pay GST, and then when you sell it, you pay GST. So as a currency, that doesn't really make sense because they're just using it as a payment instrument. Now that only really applies in Australia, and there are hundreds of exchanges online that don't fall under Australian jurisdiction, where you can get around paying GST. Now, a couple of the other exchanges in Australia, I don't know if I've put names or not, but they have negotiated GST-free Bitcoin payments. GST-free Bitcoin purchases. The other way you can do it is through local Bitcoin, where again you just meet two parties through localbitcoin.com, and you can just meet them at a cafe, etc., and pay cash there. Now it's up to you to declare that purchase on your BAS statement or your tax return or whatever, like any other business transaction.
Okay, and this was something that came up at those Senate committee hearings last year, I believe it was, when the Senate, one of the Australian Houses of Parliament, was doing an investigation, if you like, into cryptocurrency. You were invited to go down there and give a speech. Do you want to explain to listeners how all that went down?
Yeah, it was quite funny actually. Like I got invited basically to talk about the technical aspect, but it was quickly brought to my attention. They didn't want to know about the technical aspect. They're trying just to see how they can legislate it and how they can apply tax to it. So I felt a little bit on the back foot there, because that's not really my expertise. I'm not really in the tax space. But yeah, it was a good experience, and I tried to get across that this is just an alternative method of payment, an alternative payment instrument, and it's up to us as citizens to declare our transactions at the end of your financial statements, be it cash, whatever. So, and if you don't, there's penalties for not doing that. So it doesn't matter whether you're transacting in bananas, IOUs, whatever. It's just another payment instrument, and it's very efficient as a payment instrument.
Is it the case that here in Australia we do have essentially a worse method of taxing bitcoins than other jurisdictions? Is it the case that maybe we're disadvantaged here compared to other countries because of our tax laws here?
Well, that was the ruling initially, or what the ATO were giving guidelines on. It wasn't actually a firm ruling. So there was one big exchange from Melbourne that just basically shut up shop and moved to the UK. So from that point, yes, they were. But then other people are saying, well, if the ATO is classing it as property, then second-hand property doesn't incur GST. So by definition, if I take a payment and pass it on, well, I could claim that property. I could claim it by their laws as property, which doesn't incur GST. So it is a legal nightmare at the moment, but I mean that's the fun and opportunity.
Okay, well, I've got a couple of questions from the live chat, and you should understand there's about 50 people there now, and it looks as though maybe 2/3 are what you might call Bitcoin skeptics, and 1/3 are either on the fence or supporting it. That's just the way that it seems to have fallen. So I'll ask a couple of questions from the skeptics. Silver Slave asks if a certain group of people control the price, and he's talking about a certain ethno-religious group that he loves to talk about, and so do we. He says if they're the ones controlling the price, don't they have the power right from the start when it comes to the price overall?
Well, I don't believe so, because I can sell my Bitcoin for $5. I can sell it for $1,000. It's a free and open market, and you can sell it for whatever price you want. So although there are indexes or current, I guess, trends of prices, then it's up to the individuals to sell at what they think it's worth. Now the skeptics might think it's worth 50 cents. The passionate people might think it's worth thousands of dollars. So market forces will determine the true value of it. Now just on that, here in Australia, if you were to mine Bitcoin, it would currently cost you about $150 on, give or take, on electricity to mine a Bitcoin. So you could say that is the true value of a Bitcoin. Now, again, if you have solar or other renewable, cheaper power sources, then again, what is the price of a Bitcoin? These are very good conversations.
All right, then. Well, following on from that, Gambers XX says, what do you think about the US government, FBI, NSA having control over Bitcoin since they own most of it? And I think he's referring to the fact that was it Dread Pirate Roberts or something? One of the characters involved in one of the Silver, what do you call that?
Silk Road.
Silk Road, yeah. One of the characters involved in Silk Road was captured, apprehended, and it looks as though one of those spaghetti organizations got access to his Bitcoins, hundreds of thousands of them, I believe. I think that's what Gambas is referring to. What do you have to say to this, Lucas, this idea that because the government does control such a large proportion of the Bitcoins that you can't really trust the price, medium to long term?
Yeah, well, I think it's great at the moment. The more of these governments, gobble up coins, the more mine should be worth, right? So from an investment point, that's great. But sure, they could, dump them on the markets and crash the price as well. So, there is, would have to be fools not to think there is price manipulation going on. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not in the financial trading to understand how all that works. But yeah, it's definitely a concern. The more they do it, the more they can influence market prices.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, I did want to spend a bit of time having a more broad discussion about cryptography and digital currency in general. Before we get to that, though, I will ask a few more questions from the live chat. While I'm writing those down, Ethan, anything more you want to touch on with Bitcoin, or are you good to wait till the next segment?
No, I'm fine, Johnno. As I said, I'm happy to sit back and just soak up information at the moment to try and get a better understanding of Bitcoin. And for anyone out there listening that is not familiar with Bitcoin, to also absorb it, do your own research and see the positives and the benefits and the negatives behind it as well. And I thank Lucas for coming on to sort of explain these things with us. So I'm happy to sit back, Johnno.
All right, then. Well, we've looked at yourself there, Lucas, and we've also looked at Bitcoin specifically. Let's get into a more broad conversation now about cryptocurrency. Obviously, a lot of the concerns that have come up in the live chat have been to do with Bitcoin specifically because this number of Bitcoins have been taken by the government, or Bitcoin might have been started out as a psyop from the start, or controlled by certain groups from the start. But cryptocurrency in general, of which Bitcoin is just one, is its own beast. Do you want to explain to listeners where you see cryptocurrency going in the near and medium term future?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the cat has been out of the bag. So, like I said, Bitcoin from a software or architectural point is beautiful. It solves a number of computer science problems that have been around since the 70s. And if you want to read up on applied cryptography, read a book by Bruce Schneider, who mentioned the double spend problem there back in the 70s. So what it enables is trustless parties to trade or to do business or interact without a middle actor. Now, this could be anything. This could be my title deed for my house. My title deed could be my own token that's signed by my own private key. Now, when I sell it to you, Johnno, all I do is transfer that title deed over the blockchain to you, and then hand on heart, proof by maths, that you now own my house. Now, this model could be applied to hundreds of thousands of things, be it your transit ticket, your frequent flyer miles, or anything where we're using tokens to represent a value or an entity. Then stocks, whatever this. But like I said, what it involves is free and open markets that anyone can participate without governance.
So a little while ago, Lucas, you and I were grabbing a coffee or a beer in the city, and I said to you that even though I like the basic idea of cryptocurrency, I like the fact that there's no middleman, that we can trade somewhat anonymously if we try, and that it's a way for us to set our own prices with a means of exchange that can't be inflated without us having anything to do with it. Even though I love the basic idea of it, I'm concerned that there's so much power wielded by the banks and the people who control the banks that any technology that comes along that threatens them, they'll either shut it down or overtake it for themselves. What do you think about this sort of general criticism of cryptocurrency? This idea that anything that comes along that's almost too good to be true, the people who run the world will make sure that it's too good to be true.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit more optimistic than you. I mean, we've seen throughout history disruptive technologies come along. When the automobile come along, the laws that enabled people to drive cars were just ridiculous. They had to have two people walking out in front waving red flags and only driving at 5 miles an hour because the train industry didn't want automotive vehicles to come in. And over time, people go, so the better technology won. And so I'm hopeful that the big banks will fail, and the other ones who embrace these technologies will actually overcome them. Now, that's my philosophical view. But it may be the other way that the banks try and shut these technologies down. But again, we've tried with they managed to shut down Napster, but they can't shut down BitTorrent. Now you're seeing artists like Aphex Twins releasing albums on tour and BitTorrent before through the labels, and that's because the payments are going directly to the artists instead of going through these incumbents. So again, we're getting rid of the middleman, which lowers the costs. So the actors or the artists get paid, and the consumer can get a better deal. So it's this disintermediation, of these big actors.
So you seem pretty optimistic about Bitcoin specifically longer term. Have you spent much time thinking about where you think we'll be in 5 or 10 years? I mean, I know that Bitcoin's relatively new and it's hard to speculate, but in your mind, have you got an idea of where you think cryptocurrencies in general will be in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, well, I don't think they say currency is just the first app. Now, what currency enables is just people understand that a promissory note means something, and you can reward it for a good or service. But that's not really what it's about. It's about the blockchain, and it's about being able to interact peer to peer with an irreversible transaction. So, like I mentioned before, the actual currency part may actually die, but there's other opportunities, be it different tokens or title deeds or legal entities. And I see it as owning Bitcoin as being like owning shares in this beautiful technology that we call the blockchain.
Fair enough. Well, I've got a question from the live chat. Psyobstacles asks, Lucas, do you have any comments on Namecoin and how it creates allegedly unseizable domains?
Yeah, so again, what Namecoin was doing is, again, just when you register a domain name, it has to go through approval, be it ICANN and a few big central actors, and you're under the scrutiny of them to make sure that that domain name is valid or whatever they want to call it, and you have to pay a fee for it. What Namecoin does is it's basically first in wins. Whoever registers that DNS entry has ownership of it. So if you were running a website called silkroad.com, they can seize that domain name and shut your business down. It's basically a denial of service attack from a government with Namecoin, and that, again, doesn't become possible. So again, there's all these little innovations are coming out now, and what Bitcoin will be in 5 or 10 years' time will be very, very different to what we see it now. But like I said, it's the cat's out of the bag, and it's around this blockchain technology, this decentralized technology that is, I think, is very important.
But, yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's where I'm optimistic with cryptocurrency in general, is that if people can keep on using this as an idea to innovate on top of, who knows where it'll go. Obviously, my questions so far today have probably shown listeners that I'm a bit more skeptical about Bitcoin for the reasons that I've kind of implied, but that's not to say that I've given up on Bitcoin. I've never bought any. I don't own any, full disclosure here, but it's not because I'm completely pessimistic. I'm just trying to be objective here. And let me say that I've been to a few of your Bitcoin Brisbane presentations. I think they're terrific, and anyone in Brisbane should get along to listen to them and to meet the people there. What I did find about some of the crowd that you attract, Lucas, is that I think a lot of them have been drawn into Bitcoin and they've got dollar signs in their eyes. And when I first went to these Bitcoin meetups, I was hoping to meet people who saw Bitcoin or cryptocurrency as a way to avoid the middleman, the taxman, the government, the state, and the philosophical side of Bitcoin rather than the money-making side. But I found a lot of the people who were into Bitcoin, not just at your meetups, but on the internet in general, they seem to be into it because they think that they're at the front of a money-making wave, and they're in it for the money rather than for the philosophical solutions that it might offer. What do you say to all of this?
Yeah, I mean, when price goes up to $1,200-$1,400, people's ears prick up. That's I guess human nature, unfortunately. And I guess those people now who try to make a quick dollar may have lost money, which is unfortunate, but that's the reality. But like I said, you have to do your own homework, and if you're using it as a speculative or an investment opportunity, it may or may not be the right one. It may be the best investment in history. We don't know, but like anything, it's risky, and you should only invest if that's what you're going to do on what you can afford to lose. It may crash to $0 tomorrow. This whole experiment may die. That is a possibility as well. So just if you're doing it for financial, please just make sure that it's only what you can afford to lose if it does crash to zero. But if I may, John, there are a few questions on the live chat I wanted to answer.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, so there was a question about, can you make Bitcoin out of thin air? Well, you can, but the thin air is electricity, and electricity costs. So it's basically said that in Australia it works out to be about $150 worth of electricity to mine a Bitcoin, and plus the upfront expenditure of mining hardware as well. Someone had a question about an ATM for buying. There is an ATM here in Brisbane on Melbourne Street. If you want to get down there and you want to buy Bitcoin that way as well, just a dispensing, there is, full disclosure, I think a 6% fee on that if you want. So there was a comment about Mt. Gox, and yeah, that is very true, that when you leave Bitcoins on a centralized exchange and that exchange goes under, you can and will lose your Bitcoin. So make sure you just use exchanges for buying. Don't leave your Bitcoins on there. Buy and sell, please transact, but then get them off the exchange into your own personal wallet. Someone also mentioned seizures. Now, that is true. If government do get hold of or actors get hold of your private key, then they can seize your Bitcoin. Now, there's other ways to get around that, what you call multi-signature addresses. So you can have 2 to 15 signatures on an address. So say, Ethan, I could give you an address, a private key, and myself, and it could be a 2 of 2. So the only way that people could seize those coins are that both parties get forced to hand over those keys. So one key could be in a vault in Switzerland, etc. But on that, the government actually have changed legislation where they can force you to hand over your keys to unlock your computer. The sentence used to be 3 months, but they've expanded that to now to 2 years if you don't hand over those digital assets. I think that's all I had on the Q&A, on the notes that I wrote down. Sorry.
One last thing that I wanted to ask you about before you have to go was to do with the I think you've touched on it a little bit, but it's my observation that the digital security and the digital currency aren't the advancements of both aren't on a level playing field. On one hand, it seems that cryptocurrency has become a solution for many things, as you mentioned, and it's the cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin in general, but something in that range that can expand to try and solve some of these things. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of people, especially people that I've known that have bought Bitcoins, and you see on Reddit all the time that digital security isn't as advanced or as up to date as a lot of things. And for example, someone mentioned to me one time that what happens if you get knocked over one day and you take a blow to the head, or you forget your passwords, or sure, you can back up, use 2FA, change your email passwords, use an on-screen keyboard, etc. But the very notion that we have to protect such valuable files and such valuable assets on a digital platform is hard, because the digital security aspect hasn't become as advanced as the digital currency itself.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So what I tout at the meetups is there's no one size fits all here. Now, I actually use analog solutions. I have a couple of private keys literally etched in steel. That plate is split up in two, and I store those plates into physical different locations in fireproof safes. So I mean, that's a simple solution. Now the private key is about, say, 60 characters long, so it's hard to write down, but you only write it down once, and then like I said, there's ways to be a bit more creative with storing those private keys than just on a hard drive or a password protected system. Sorry, there's another point there, but I've just forgotten what you just said. But so, yeah, but with Bitcoin, the security does fall on the individual themselves, and I don't think people are ready for that responsibility yet. So if you're not competent with backups, etc., then yeah, again, you'll need help. And people have lost a lot of Bitcoin from computer crashes. So that is where the innovation will happen. That's when that's when it'll go mainstream. There's just a comment here about Ripple. Ripple again is a good technology. Now, what Ripple tries to solve is just trading between different currencies, what they call medieval banking. But Ripple was pre-mined about 70%. So you have to, again, you're buying into a currency that a couple of actors own 70% of it. So I don't really like that myself, just personally. I'd rather it be a free-for-all, and whoever gets in from the start can compete evenly than a pre-mined currency.
Boys, I know that Lucas has to take off. He's got some little ones that he has to feed very soon, but was there anything that you wanted to touch on today with the listeners about the work that you do to keep your information private, or where you see cryptography coming in handy there?
I guess there's a few things you can start to do if you want to start to protect your online identity. There's a good service called protonmail.ch. I'll send you the link, Johnno, if you can put it on the site, where it's a company in Switzerland who's doing client-side encryption on your email. If you also want to start looking at what they call PGP encryption, I think there's only a Mac and Linux client. There may be a Windows one, I'm not too sure. I don't use Windows. Just to encrypt your mail and digitally sign your mail as well. So these are steps we can start to take to protect your online communications. But like everyone, it's like that fax machine, right? If the other recipient doesn't have a fax machine, then it's a useless piece of technology. So we have to kind of spread the awareness and start getting people looking at these other technologies and start encrypting that mail and other forms of communications online.
Well, I'll tell you what, mate, I know that the kids are biting at your heels, so we'll let you get going, but do you want to give the listeners any final words where they can contact you, or anything you want to promote before you take off?
Yeah, I guess through the meetup, like I said, the meetup is trying to be the community focused, like what you're doing with your podcast, where you can come along. I've got some sponsors who provide beer and pizza, so yeah, for all else fails, just come along and grab a beer and meet some like-minded individuals or not like-minded individuals. And if there's any questions or comments, or you want to know a specific thing, come along and ask me, and I'm happy to show you the ropes, or try and field any questions. But by all means, just sign up from meetup.com/Bitcoin Brisbane, or shoot me an email through that platform as well.
Lucas, thank you so much for your time, mate. I know that you're a long-time listener now, and it was good to finally get you on board, and you'll be welcome to join us again anytime you like. So all the best, mate. We'll catch up soon, eh?
Long-time listener, first-time caller. Thanks, guys.
All right, mate.
Yeah.
So we'll get some final thoughts now from you there, Lindsay. It's been a bit of a diverse episode, if we can use that word. We've covered a lot of things, vaccinations and the police state and Bitcoins and everything in between. Any final thoughts for listeners for this episode, mate?
No. I think it all spoke for itself. The only thing was with the Bitcoin, I'm still more interested in hearing what other people have got to say. But other than that, yeah, I think it's been a great show. We've covered a lot of things, and I think we've sort of pulled a lot of threads together. And I think that was the benefit of this show. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Thanks. I don't have any more to add.
No worries, mate. Well, Ethan, we did lose you momentarily during the show, but you're back here now. Any final thoughts for episode 31 of the ARP?
Thanks, Jono. I just want to thank everyone once again for tuning in, and to thank Lucas for taking the time out to join us to speak about Bitcoins and cryptocurrency. It's even just in this little discussion that we've had, I've tied a lot of loose ends between information that I've heard from a lot of other people, and we'll definitely be doing more research. And for the show specifically, I thought once again, we covered a lot of things, and I really I really encourage people to look at the positive side of things and what we can do and solutions behind it, and not allow these topics to weigh you down and to affect your mental health. Radiate positivity to those around you, radiate positivity that we will beat this one day, and spread the word with people. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in, Jono.
That's the way. Well, I've got a few final thoughts I want to leave people with. The first one is that for the last few episodes, we haven't read out anything from the mailbag because we've had so much content to get through. But I can assure you that as of next week, we'll bring back the mailbag segment because we have been getting a lot of correspondence from the listeners. And I did spend a few hours yesterday going back through some of the email that was directed to me specifically. And I want to thank all the people who took the time to write those emails to us. Some of them were terrific, and I'll be reading some of those out from next week going forward. For those who aren't aware, we do have a Gmail that we do check. Ethan checks it regularly. I'm a little bit more targeted, but I'll try and be better on that in the future. It's australianroundtable@gmail.com, and if it's just regular feedback that you'd like to share with us, or you've got a comment that you'd like us to read out on the show, we've got a topic that you'd like to recommend, and we've had a number of people recommend guests and what have you. It's all very valued and very appreciated. So please, if you'd like to get in touch with us, australianroundtable@gmail.com. And like I said previously, if you'd like us to read your comment out on the air, make sure that you make that clear in the email. Some people want to be anonymous, or they don't want their correspondence read out. So just be clear in the email if you'd like us to read it out. Of course, we do have between 40 and 50 people watching live, generally week to week. Some people can't tune in live, so if you want to get involved in the correspondence, the roundtable@gmail.com is the best way to go about that. We have got all of these episodes now up on podbean.com, so if you do use iTunes, you can subscribe to our RSS. We're working on that at the moment, actually, but that'll be done within the next 24 to 48 hours. You'll be able to subscribe to us on iTunes, and the episodes will come up immediately. In the meantime, the episodes go up in MP3 format. They're about 80 or 90 megabytes, so if you like to listen in the car, or you don't want to be near your computer to listen to the show, australianroundtable.podbean.com or just ozroundtable.com. We upload the MP3 as well as all of the information, and that leads to my final thought for this episode. We do take a lot of time to make sure that all of the links are provided on our website for each episode. So for episode 1 right through to 31, and each episode going forward, we provide as many links as we can for you to verify for yourself, and it comes in handy for a number of reasons. The first one is because you shouldn't trust everything that we say just because we're saying it. Just like with everybody, you should be verifying it for yourself to make sure it's legitimate. The second reason is because sometimes from time to time we might make mistakes. So if you check our information and you see that there's a flaw or an error, you can let us know. We'll be the first to correct it. The third one is because it's a 2-hour show, and as you can tell, we have to rush through it because there's so much to get through every week. We can't give you all the information that we've got in our hands. But if you go and check those articles for yourself, you'll get more information for you, and fourthly, it'll help you retain that information yourself. So please make use of the website, ozroundtable.com. It's free, there's no ads there, it's very easy to use, all links are provided, and I'm sure that if you find the information that we talk about handy or useful, you'll find the website handy as well, so make sure you check that out. But thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the official episode 31 of the Australian Roundtable Podcast. Live listeners, stick around. We'll go to a Q&A after the show. But if you're listening on MP3 or to the official upload on YouTube, we're going to wrap it up right now on May the 10th, 2015. This has been episode 31, and we'll catch you at 3 p.m. Brisbane time next week.